And then what happens with people, it's all mindset. It's always mindset. It's like the core of it is always 90% mindset, 10% strategy. Because I can literally tell you, like a book, okay, this is how you start selling online. This is how you talk to someone. This is how you close a sale. This is what you say. This, like, I literally have sales scripts, and people will follow that to the T. And there would still be something that comes up for them or something that blocks for them. And it's usually it tells me that there's a level of mindset that needs to be. And it's a lot of it, it's the fear of what others will think. It's the fear of selling. People have, money stories. It's the fear of, being not worthy. So the imposter syndrome comes up, right? Tons of people with the fear of success, like being worthy of living the life that you want to create, right? Something that I personally had struggled with as well, like being able to say like, oh, I want to create this type of business and I want to change the world. Like, who am I to change the world? You know what I mean?
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin? And how do you develop the mindset and skill set to be successful? Welcome, everyone, to the Sprint to Success with Design Thinking podcast. I'm your host, Saba Kidwai. Join me each week as I share the stories and strategies from the world's leading researchers and practitioners about why they believe the answer lies in practicing design thinking. You often hear young people today say, "I want to change the world." What once used to seem like a lofty goal is second nature to today's generation. They know they can, they believe they can, and so they do. Today's guest is no exception, and I'm delighted to share a conversation I had with Jen Marilla as we discuss how she actualized her vision for wanting to change the world into a thriving social entrepreneurship venture that led her to creating online courses and masterminds where now she shares how others can do this as well. Jen is a risk taker, she's a traveler, she's a storyteller, she's a social entrepreneur, and she's a professional dreamer. She writes for publications like the Huffington Post, Elite Daily, and Thrive Global, and she's been featured in Forbes and Matador Network. As much as she finds sharing her own unique insights important, she believes it's essential to support others in telling their story, which she does through her online courses and masterminds. Now, if you're an OG listener of the podcast, you'll remember that one of the early episodes I did was with Professor Matthew Manos, who shared a vision for social entrepreneurs as futurists. Those who don't just react to the problems around them, but rather these futurists, he said, preemptively identify opportunities that lead to positive change before the challenges arise. This intersection of entrepreneurship and design that Jen and I discussed today reminds me of a book I'm currently reading called Designing Japan by author Ken Yahara. I'm going to read you an excerpt where he shares a definition of design that aligns so beautifully with the conversation I'm going to have with Jen today. He says, design is the education of our desires. Products and environments are harvests reaped from the soil of human desire. To create quality products and environments, we have to actualize well-fertilized soil by refining human desire. Design, he says, is fundamental to this process. Interacting with well-thought-out design induces an awakening from which changes in our desires arise, resulting in the modifications to patterns of consumption, resource utilization, and finally, lifestyle. Design, he says, is an intention to a desired end. It's in this designing of this desired end that social impact entrepreneurs act as futurists, where they make underlying potential visible and share an explicit and significant path for the future to create a vision that can be shared with many. Today, we're going to hear Jen's vision. So I begin by asking her how she came to develop an interest in social entrepreneurship and how that passion has manifested into a business over the years.
I did a master's in social entrepreneurship and business development in 2012 and 2013. And essentially it started because I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I knew that I wanted to change the world. Like I knew I wanted to give back some way, shape, or form. I believe that the key to happiness is helping others, right? And that's like the you find the joy in the very simple form of that human instinct in us that is like takes that simple gratitude and giving someone, knowing that they can't give it back to you, right? Like just doing something out of the goodness of your heart. And I've always been that type of person. And so I wanted to create something that was different. And I've always been like that. Like I think that what makes successful businesses are innovative businesses, right? Like Apple, Google, like these guys are game changers, right? Like brought to the table something completely different and they change society, right? And so I was looking at these businesses and I was like, we're going to get to a world where we need to connect. First of all, we are connected, and we're going to start to see that more consciously. And eventually what's going to start to happen is that the only way we're going to be able to change our world and our society and our climate and everything that we care about is going to happen with the big guys. It's going to happen with Microsoft. It's going to happen with Google. It's going to happen with Apple. It's going to happen with the guys that socially change society. And so to me, it was almost like something that was like inside me that was like, this is the future of business. Like you need to go there. You need to figure out what that looks like. So that's where my passion started. And think like Tom's shoes. I think that's like the best business model, right? Where you buy a pair of shoes and another pair of shoes gets given away to someone in Guatemala or Mexico who's in need of a pair, right? And those are the kind of businesses that I was interested in building. So when I graduated from grad school, come back to New York, I tried to get a job in the sector and nobody was hiring. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to marketing, which is what I knew. So I was an account manager for an agency for about 3-4 years. And I wasn't happy. Not unhappy with my job or my boss. I loved my boss. I loved my coworkers. They were the reason I stuck around so long was because I loved them, but I lacked the purpose. And I was like, why am I doing this? Like what I do, somebody can do better. And the funny thing was that when I told my boss I was leaving, he was like, nobody does this as good as you. Like, well, you want more money? Like, what do you want? And I was like, no, I'm like, I'm not happy, right? It's not fulfilling. And if we're meant to work for the rest of our lives, to me, it's almost logical. Like you should do something that lights you up. You should do something that makes you happy, because anything that I've ever done that's lit me up has always been lucrative, has always come back tenfold. So I've been a big fan of some travel bloggers, and I was like, you know what? I want to travel the world, but I don't want to travel the world and just like travel. Like I want to change the world. And I remember sharing this with people and then being like, oh my God, you're so sweet. It's like, no, you guys, like it's a bigger vision here. Like this is just small. So what I started to do is that I started to carry clean water filters to developing countries. And I built, like, the content that I was producing was around socially sustainable traveling for purpose, right? And then I was going to communities and I was working with thought leaders in the communities, and I was teaching hygiene. I was teaching education. It basically was a segue to allow me to be able to come in and be looked at as someone who knows what she's talking about, right? Water is the foundation of what builds any society. Did you know that we can live off water for 30 days? If you had no food, you can drink water for 30 days. Would you be healthy? No, but you would live. Like you can then like get the nutrition and et cetera that you need. But essentially our bodies can live off of that. And to me, I say it's the foundation of a sustainable community, because it starts with clean water that then builds hygiene, which then builds education. And it starts with the mother. It starts with the woman. If the woman can have clean water to cook for her children, to clean their child, the hygiene, you see what I mean? Like the ripple effect begins to happen, right? And so I started bringing these clean water filters. And what I started to notice was that they didn't know any better. A lot of these places that I was visiting, like India, Bali, Mexico, Guatemala, Nicaragua, tons of countries where they knew that the water they were drinking wasn't sustainable. In Bali, it was like the biggest shock for me, because they were drinking like literally, it was like foggy water, and they were drinking it like if it was normal, and they were dying young. They were, their mothers or fathers were dying like in their 30s, in their early 40s, and to them it was normal. And it was because obviously they're genetically immune to this. And after a while, the organs were like, I can't filter this anymore. Like, this is what's happening. So anyway, it just really opened up my eyes to the fact that we live in a world, and at the time it was 2015, where this is still a problem. And like, I come from New York. Like, I drink from the faucet. Probably shouldn't, but it's definitely more attainable than it is for someone that's in Africa or in Indonesia, you know what I mean, where they have to travel to get clean water in Africa. So it really opened up my eyes to that. And so I started to build content and work with companies and build a business model as a blogger who the social initiative was to teach others. And it wasn't just like bring these water filters. It was to teach these people the hygiene behind it, right? So wash your hands, clean the water filter. And then it developed into, I was working with communities. I worked with women specifically when I taught this because each water filter was for 100 people for up to 5 years. I know. So the impact was huge, right? And so I was working with these women who were in communities whose husband were out in the countries working all day. And so they were taking care of their children, right? And it was community centers of 40, 50 people. And these women, in order to make money, they were artisans. And they were like, how do I sell? And how do I sell this on Instagram? And so then I was able to start teaching them, like, okay, this is how you start an Instagram profile. This is how you do this, right? And so that evolved into that. So it was really interesting to see that over time. And so I did that for about 3.5 years. And then unfortunately, I had to kind of put a little stop to it because I realized that in terms of a business perspective, you know, if I really do want to make an impact, there's a part of me that also needs to make an actual sustainable business model for myself. And that wasn't happening. I was either always breaking even or I was always finding myself less than. And I was like, I need to create a business model that is definitely more sustainable. Like, how do I make more money so that I can help other people, kind of thing. And so the future of the brand will definitely expand more in the social initiative part. And it's exciting because I have a ton of ideas, but we'll see where it takes me. But yeah, that's kind of the foundation of how it all started.
I love that Jen believes so passionately that yes, she can make a difference. She does make a difference. Yes, there are larger organizations out there. However, the impact we each make locally is ultimately what helps create collective global impact. As I'm listening to Jen share, what I'm most struck by, and perhaps you are too, is her creative confidence and belief in herself and her vision. This is one of the mindsets that you nurture when you practice design thinking. David and Tom Kelly, the authors of Creative Confidence, Unleashing the Creative Potential in Us All, share that it's the combination of thought and action that defines creative confidence, the ability to come up with new ideas, and the courage to try them out. Jen not only thought she could change the world, she was courageous and took action towards that vision, and throughout has iterated and grown into what she is today. I think we all have those moments where we have a vision, a work we want to do, passion projects we want to explore, yet we get stuck in the thinking. I first heard Jen share about her confidence and how she developed it during Clubhouse session. She had so many incredible stories to share about the role that environment and people play, so I asked her to share some of these stories and tell us what drives her creative confidence.
I think as a child, I was very, very creative and always like in my own world. Like my parents were constantly like, Jen, let's come back to reality. Let's come back to it. And it's funny because I know they obviously met well. So both my parents, I'll give people context that are listening. Both my parents are like Cuban immigrants, very successful entrepreneurs. Like they came here not with nothing. They met in the United States on a blind date. Like they are just, rock stars. And they were taught, the American dream. Get an education, find a spouse, buy a house, get a dog, get married, make babies, like do all of that in that order, right? Like, and very analytical, very logical is their thought process. And then of course they created a daughter who's like, oh, I want to travel the world and save lives. And they were like, what? Like I have a sister and she's an immigration lawyer, but I've always been that kind of person, just very outside of the box, very creative. And obviously they meant well, but as a child, they always told me like, you need to come back down to reality. And it did serve me obviously owning my own business and growing a successful business. But in parts, it kind of did me some damage because it withheld me from being honest with myself about the future I wanted to build, and like the education I wanted to get. So I've always had this sense of a greater purpose, always. And then I just kind of silenced it for a while. And then I had a younger brother, and I share this openly with my audience, and he passed away. It'll be 11 years in September now. But at the time that I left, it was 5 years. And for those 5 years prior to him passing away, and we were really close, I struggled a lot. I was, struggling with depression, severe depression, anxiety. It was a very foggy, dark place in my life. And I lost myself. And I hit a lot of rock bottoms. There wasn't just one, there was plenty of rock bottoms. And one of the last ones that I did hit, though, I kind of saw myself in the mirror and the woman that I was becoming, and I didn't recognize her. And I didn't like her. And I kind of had a moment, like a come to Jesus moment, where I was like, what am I doing? And I could have chosen to continue down the road that I was on, or I could have chosen to do something different. Obviously, I chose something different. But I had that moment to be like, you want to do big things. You want to do something better. Like, this cannot be it. And I was in such a low place where I was just like thirsty. Like I was like quenching for life. I was like, I didn't feel anything. I was in toxic relationships. And I was just a mean person, which is weird because like, I'm not a mean person, and like seeing myself in that light was just not good. And so that was my wake up call. And I realized that I had a choice, and we are the creators of our reality. We're the creators of our experience. And I was like, right, I don't like what I see in this mirror. How can I fix this? And what do I need to do? And I went back to what makes me happy. And it was helping people. And I was like, all right, how do I do this? How do I help people? How does this evolve? And yeah, and I literally, from the moment I told my parents I was leaving to travel the world, I said I wanted to change the world. And they would smile. My dad, I'll never forget this. Literally, when I told him that day, he was like, that's sweet. And he like patted me on the head. And he's like, you have to remember, you have to eat. Like, and I remember like just being like, I was like, oh, and like, it was the fire that was like, oh, I'm going to show you this is going to work.
Jen highlights a challenge that many young people face: the pressure to conform to expectations of how others define success. This is where having an understanding of your vision and values, along with data points, can strengthen how you advocate for your desired goals. If you listened into last week's episode with Nancy, she does a beautiful job of this as she shares why she decided to find and no sleep, and uses data alongside her personal experiences to advocate for her larger purpose. This is why Jen marks step 1 as having a deep level of self-awareness and recognizing that this is going to be an ongoing journey that will evolve. As Jen speaks, you can tell how her own self-awareness is interwoven into how she advocates for not only why she does what she does, but how she can help you do it as well. One of my favorite mantras from Jen that echoes throughout all the content she creates is that we are all creators of our own experience. With self-awareness playing such a critical role, I asked Jen to take us deeper into this topic and tell us what steps she believes people should take to develop a deeper sense of self-awareness.
Saba, you were just killing it with these questions. Like, I love it. So I also think it has to take a level of you wanting to get to know who you are. I don't think a lot of people know who they are. I think and I'm 32, right? And then, so they say by the age of 35, we're just machines. Like, if you haven't dove into who you are, you haven't done some type of therapy or like deep work or something, like you kind of run on autopilot. And I know I have friends that are like that, right? They just don't see their behavior. They don't see their actions, etc. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make it wrong or right. So I think the first thing to recognize is, how well do you actually know yourself? How well are you willing to get to know yourself? And then have empathy for yourself. I'm no angel. Like I have demons. I have lots of demons and I recognize them and I know who they are and I know when they want to come up. And I think that's what makes us human, right? And as evolved humans, and Darwin's theory of, I'm a big scientist. I love science. So like Darwin's theory of biology, like the best survive, right? The finest, the fittest survive. As humans, that's just going to keep going. And I just think we are at a place culturally, not culturally, as a humanity, like as humans, where people are just waking up to who they are and what they want. And I think it's happening more often than not. And so I think it starts there. I think it's getting crystal clear and like seeing, okay, I know that I'm this person and I know that I'm this person too. And I'm not going to make it bad or wrong, right? Like this is who I am. All of me is whole and complete. Now, what do I actually want for myself, right? And we mirror our realities. So the relationships that you have, the businesses that you have, you create it. And so just getting crystal clear on like who you are, I think that's the first thing, and what you want. Giving yourself the time. Like this isn't like a one and done deal. Like, if you're trying to figure out a math problem, like you hire a tutor and you teach yourself. Like, no, this is actually like you doing this work forever and like recognizing, oh, I had this thought process while this was happening. Oh, I mean, that's not wrong, but I don't want to have that. So how do I change that experience? How do I develop an inner knowing that we're going to change that kind of thing?
I appreciate and love how honest and vulnerable Jen is as she shares her story. She's right. Many of us don't want to look in the mirror and be honest about who we are and what we want. This is a topic that came up when I was interviewing Brant Menswar, author of Black Sheep, Unleash the Extraordinary, Awe-Inspiring, Undiscovered You. Brant shares how there are 5 core values that drive what we do. However, most people, he says, have aspirational values, echoing what Jen shared with us today as well. She says we struggle to look in the mirror and be honest about what those core values are. As Jen shares, if you want to become more self-aware, begin by asking who you are, what you want, and then giving yourself the time to develop. If you're interested in this topic, I highly recommend not only Brant's book, Black Sheep, where he also has an assessment that he takes you to around developing your values and exercises guiding you towards moving away from the aspirational ones and really driving into your core values. And I definitely recommend his interview here on the podcast. I want to take a moment and also highlight that wanting to do work that's purpose-driven isn't an entrepreneurship thing or a Gen Z thing. It's a human thing. In my research on using design thinking to challenge traditional practices in education, I share that the reason for doing so isn't a technology challenge or solving an economic challenge. It's an opportunity to solve a human challenge, one that allows every individual to have the exposure and opportunity to reach their potential from a young age. The health pandemic we're experiencing has brought the inequities of society before us. And it's made many of us question, what is our purpose? What work do we want to do? How are we spending our time? What are we spending it on? And who are we spending it with? And it's really left us thinking about our priorities. With this in mind, I asked Jen to share more about the difference between entrepreneurship and the importance of having an entrepreneurial mindset.
Essentially, I think we need people that need to be in corporate. Like, we cannot have like a functioning society if they're not people who like love going to a 9 to 5 and love that like stability and commitment. Like there's definitely, I know I'm a little crazy. Like, if the world was full of Jennifers, we'd be in a lot of trouble, guys. Like straight up. So I think that that's the foundation. And what I mean is just innovatively, like you can be in a corporate setting and just think, oh, well, what if I did it my own way? And what if it worked this way? And how else can we make it better? And that's what I mean by it. And I think people put so much emphasis on like, oh, in order for you to like find a purpose and be successful, you have to be an entrepreneur. And it's like, no, not at all. Like I'm trying to build a company, right? Like I have a team of 5 and my goal is to build an actual company that I'm paying employees. Like I left the corporate world to create my own corporate office, right? But the idea is that each person is an entrepreneur within their position, within their job. So how do you create that? How do you create that confidence to show up? And I mean, I believe that in my company, I give that opportunity to my managers and my team to be able to just say, like, this is the way I've done it. If it doesn't work for you, that's really fine. If you can find a better way, I'm all for it. That's what it is. It's just taking that initiative within your company. I understand that in some companies it's a little harder than others because there's like different levels and sign-offs and legal that you have to go through, et cetera. But overall, I think that anyone who owns a company knows the value in employing someone who sees themselves as their own entrepreneur in the position that they're in.
I wonder how many episodes I can go without talking about the book Linchpin by Seth Godin. Probably not very many, as it's one of my most core resources, and it's a book that I turn to time and time again. Seth Godin, I think, just really phrases it the best when he comes to rethinking our role in the world of work and what it means to be indispensable. One of my favorite lines from his book is, "The job is what you do when you are told what to do." Someone can always do your job a little better, a little faster, cheaper than you can. But your art is what you do when no one can tell you exactly how to do it. Your art is the act of taking personal responsibility, challenging the status quo, and changing people. That's what makes you indispensable, and that's what Seth Godin says makes you a linchpin, and that is what you need to thrive in today's world of work. This linchpin mentality, this creativity is really what makes us valuable. So how do you begin this journey? I recently heard a brilliant strategy from Chris Do, who hosts the Future podcast. He said, find the people you admire and identify the source code of success. I love that term, the source code of success. Essentially what he means is examine what they did to get to where they are. What patterns do you see emerge? I've come to appreciate the people who create online courses where they start sharing these exact strategies. Things that took them months, sometimes years to learn and develop and create, they've curated into a course and they're sharing that source code of success with you. I asked Jen to share why she created her course, what people learn, and a few success stories.
So I have an online course. It's called the Cash and Clients Academy, the CCA, I call it, Online Business on Demand. And it's basically a community that I've built. It's a course, but within it, there's a community of people who are literally at the foundation of starting an online business. So they're thinking about it. They have a few ideas. They don't know which one's going to work, and they can't wrap their head around how they're going to make money. They're people that are content creators, digital educators, brand experts, consultants, bloggers, coaches, who are like, I want to be this person, but how do I create a package? How do I even start a website, right? What should my logo be? What should my name be? That kind of stuff. And I created that because I wish I had that when I first started. God, I messed up so bad. And I always look back and I laugh. Thank God I laugh. Because or else I would have quit a long time ago. But when I first started, it was just a hot mess. It was an absolute hot mess. And I was on fire for a while. I was just like, how do I do this? Oh, this is how you do SEO. This is how you do that. And so it's just a foundation of what you need to get started. So we walk through building a website, what that looks like, getting a name, actually having an idea that's instead of a hobby. So I tell people that if you either have a really expensive hobby or you have a business, right? and figuring which one you have. And for the most part, when you're starting out, you have a very expensive hobby until it clicks. And then when it clicks, it's such a game changer, right? And so getting people to that place, which creating that product, selling it online, what that looks like organically, not using Facebook ads or anything like that. I have another program that dives into more scaling, and that's more of a mastermind. It's more me hands-on. But this is just, a 7-module course where it's recordings of me actually walking you through okay, this is your idea. Let's break it down. Who's your ideal client? What's your messaging behind it? How do we show up on social media? What are ways that you can expand your reach, right? And then how do you sell it? How do you get on a sales call with someone? How do you have that conversation? How do you sell it on social media? And it's so different. And I think that I've had people that have joined who are in their early 20s, and I have people that have joined who are in their 50s and 60s. And it's just so interesting to see the pivot. And what I mean is from the older audience and the older students that I've had, the way I framed social media is social media was like, if it was 1950 and you had a business, you would probably be knocking on doors or paying for newspapers, right? And social media has made it so much easier where you just literally, like, you can show up in your pajamas in a bathing suit. Nobody knows. And you're just there and you're just texting, right? And you're just getting on the Zoom and you're just on Instagram. So it's allowed you to be a little bit more flexible, and it's allowed you to reach people from all over the world, not just your 5-block radius, because that's all the energy you have to walk, right? And when I shift that perspective for the older audience, that has been like, oh my God, you're so right. Okay, so then I can talk to people. I'm like, yeah, you can talk to people, right? Like, that's the point. The whole point of social media is to connect. And so what if you connected and you added value, and what that would look like, right? So yeah, I mean, I've had students that the majority of my students have ideas, and they come to me with several ideas, and we basically wipe them all out. And then there's one that really sticks. And then we build off of that. And it's like the website, the logo colors, the packages, and then it's like creating the content, showing up and creating that consistency. And then they get to the level that they've probably hit, I would say 1,000 or maybe less in their business. They're still working a 9 to 5, or they're fully committed. Cause like in recent cases, it's been because COVID has happened. So like these people have no jobs. They're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So they've made they've seen that this possibility is there. And then it's like, okay, now how do I take it to the next level? Like, how do I really scale? And then what happens with people, it's all mindset. It's always mindset. It's like the core of it is always 90% mindset, 10% strategy. Because I can literally tell you, like a book, okay, this is how you start selling online. This is how you talk to someone. This is how you close a sale. This is what you say. This, like, I literally have sales scripts, and people will follow that to the T. And there would still be something that comes up for them or something that blocks for them. And it's usually it tells me that there's a level of mindset that needs to be. And it's a lot of it's the fear of what others will think. It's the fear of, being not worthy. So the imposter syndrome comes up, right? Tons of people with the fear of success, like being worthy of living the life that you want to create, right? Something that I personally had struggled with as well, like being able to say like, oh, I want to create this type of business and I want to change the world. Like, who am I to change the world? You know what I mean? Like that kind of thought process. So yeah, it's a big part of it is mindset. And this course, it definitely is a full-on strategy, but I've stepped in, we do monthly coaching calls as well. And it's a lot of that. What happens on the call is like people working through, their little kinks here and there.
Moving away from having an expensive hobby to a business is what Jen helps people do. Launching and scaling a business isn't really something you learn in school, and it's definitely something that we need to be talking more about, not just for young people, but for people who are at all different levels in their professional journey. I love how Jen reminds us that making these often desired transitions is 90% mindset and 10% strategy. It's one of the reasons I so deeply advocate for design thinking early on. It helps us develop this mindset from a young age. Things like overcoming fear, managing imposter syndrome, and of course, developing that creative confidence. Fascinated by Jen's experience in both traditional learning environments and in evolving online environments, given that she's created a course and mastermind, I asked Jen how she sees the evolution of learning between these different spaces evolving.
Oh man, I could talk about this for days. I think we're following a system that was created years ago, literally centuries ago, and it worked at that time. And I think times have evolved, and we need to catch up, kind of thing. I would love to send my future children to a school where they have the opportunity to pick their subjects. I think there's a core that every student needs to have, right? Like you need to have maths, you need to have reading, you need to have English, like fine. But do they need to have it really, like, do they want entrepreneurial? Do they want mindset? Do they want to just like run around in a yard for an hour? Like some kids really, I was one of those kids. Like I had ADD. So I was like, put me in a room and let me bounce off the walls for an hour so that I can sit in reading and I can like focus, right? And so I think that the times have changed. One of my biggest goals in life is to be a professor at a university. and teach an entrepreneur class. Oh my goodness, would I be so happy? I don't even want to do it for the money. I just want to do it to be able to get, especially college students, at that place where it's like, I went to Pace University. I got my bachelor's at Pace University, and I'm very much involved in the university. And I've spoken at a few marketing classes through the years. And one of my professors, one of my oldest professors, favorite professor, still in touch with him. And like right before COVID, we had dinner in the city, and he was like, I want you to come speak to my class. And then I was like, he's like, there's actually an opening for a professor at Pace. And I was like, oh my God, sign me up. And he's like, what would you teach a class on? I was like, he starts laughing. He's like, I can't. People are just going to drop out of college. And I was like, open their own businesses. And I started laughing. I was like, it wouldn't be so bad, would it? And he was like cracking up. And I was like, no, I could be a professor for senior students who are looking to build a business, and they can start it at the university, right? Like that can be a container, that can be a class. And so like doing something like that, I don't think you need a college education anymore. I think at one point it won't be necessary. I think the reason it's still important right now is because there is a generation that is validating that piece of paper, but eventually I hate to say this, that generation will die off. And there will get to a point where people will be like, oh yeah, it's great that you went to Harvard, amazing. What else can you do? You know what I mean? And I think that weighs more than anything else. I think that we'll get to a place where that's just going to change. And unless you want to be a doctor, obviously you're an engineer or a lawyer, you don't really need to go to school. There's so many opportunities for you to learn, to get your feet wet, to just like really experience it.
I couldn't agree more when Jen shares the value of how we personalize our learning. As much as we love freedom and choice, it can often be complicated and confusing to navigate. Sometimes it's easier to just have someone tell you what to do, where to go, and what to learn. The challenge, however, is doing that doesn't really leave us feeling joy or feeling fulfilled. That self-awareness about who we are and what we want is ultimately what will help us identify those individuals who can provide us with that source code of success to personalize our own learning pathway and reach our goals. To embrace a non-linear life filled with choice, purpose, and freedom, I asked Jen what is one thing we need to unlearn so that we can become better at shaping our destinies.
The way success looks. I think as a society, we put so much pressure, especially with females, the way success looks. Culturally, that's a huge difference. I think in the Hispanic culture, I can speak for the Hispanic culture, success is being married and having children. It's extremely successful if you are a CEO of a corporation, etc., but you're not really successful. And I know you guys, whoever's listening right now can't see me, but I'm like winking and smiling. Like you are not extremely successful if you're not a mother or, a wife. And I'm not, by all means, like I want all those things as well. I just think that it looks differently. And there's so much pressure in our society to make it look a very specific way. I'm 32, I'm single, my child is my business. My husband is my business, right? I am married to that and I wouldn't have it any other way. And I think as a society, there is so much pressure for women to do those things before and then create that, or not even have the opportunity to create that at all. And I think that and for men too, I think it works both ways. I think men have a lot of pressure. They have to live to a certain standard to be able to maintain their wife and children, etc. And I think that as a society, we need to start changing the way success looks. And I think it starts there.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you still have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Sprint to Success with Design Thinking community.